My parents always had a favorite line. "You'll never own anything, Penelope." So why was there a property deed sitting in the middle of the dinner table with my full name printed on it? Why did the address match the house they were living in? And why did my dad suddenly go quiet the second I pushed it toward him? I hadn't bought a house. I hadn't signed anything, at least not that I remembered. I looked straight at him. "Then explain why this says I do." My mom's fork froze mid-air. My dad didn't answer. He just stared at the paper like it wasn't supposed to exist. "If you're listening to this from somewhere else, tell me where you are and what time it is there." I wish I had paid attention sooner because that document didn't just prove something, it exposed everything. If you want the full story, stay with me and subscribe. 6 months before that dinner, my life looked steady. Not glamorous, not flashy, but stable in a way I had worked hard for. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment just outside downtown Phoenix. Clean, quiet, nothing fancy. I worked as a financial analyst for a mid-sized firm, mostly reviewing risk profiles and credit exposure for commercial clients. It wasn't exciting, but it paid well, and more importantly, it gave me control. Control was something I didn't grow up with. My parents, Miguel and Rosa Perez, believed in survival above all else. They had come to the U.S. with very little, built a life from scratch, and carried that mindset into everything, including how they saw money, loyalty, and family. To them, resources weren't individual, they were shared, or more accurately, redistributed. And I was the one with the most to redistribute. At least once a week, my phone would light up with my mother's name. The calls followed a pattern I could practically recite. "Hey, mija. How are you?" "I'm good, Mom." "What's going on?" A pause. A sigh. "Well, your father's been stressed. The house. You know how things are. It was never direct. Never a simple request. It was always wrapped in emotion first, then expectation. At first I helped without thinking. A few hundred here, a bill there. Then it became larger. Property taxes, repairs. Something about refinancing to get ahead of rising rates. Every time I hesitated, the tone shifted. "We didn't raise you to turn your back on family. Everything we did was for you. It wasn't yelling, it was worse. Quiet disappointment. The kind that makes you question yourself." My younger brother Daniel usually stayed out of it. He still lived at home working part-time, drifting between plans. When I asked him once why he didn't contribute more, he shrugged. "They don't expect it from me the way they do from you." He said it like it was obvious. And maybe it was. About 4 months before that dinner, my father called me directly, something he didn't do often. "Penelope, we need your help with something important," he said. His voice was firm, controlled. "The house. We're trying to refinance. The bank needs stronger credit." I leaned back in my chair at work, already feeling the pressure building behind the words. "What kind of help? Just paperwork?" he said quickly. "Temporary authorization. It's procedural. You won't be responsible for anything." I should have stopped him there, asked questions, requested copies. Instead, I said, "Send me what you need," because that's what I always did. A few days later, I met them at a local branch office. The appointment was quick, almost too quick. A bank representative walked us through a stack of documents, flipping pages, pointing to signature lines. "This just allows your father to act on your behalf for this transaction," she said. "It helps streamline the process." I remember hesitating for a second, pen hovering above the paper. "Is there any risk to me?" I asked. My father answered before she could. "No. It's family. We're just trying to protect what we have." My mother reached over and touched my arm. "We wouldn't put you in a bad position." That was the moment I decided to trust them. I signed. After that, things went quiet. No urgent calls, no requests, just the usual check-ins and small talk. I told myself it meant everything had worked out. Then, about 3 weeks before the dinner, I got an email from a bank I didn't usually interact with. Subject line: loan confirmation documents. At first, I thought it was spam. The amount listed didn't make sense. The property address looked familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. I almost deleted it. But something about it lingered. I opened the attachment. It took a second for my brain to process what I was looking at. Then I saw it. Borrower: Penelope Perez. Not co-signer, not authorized party. Primary borrower. My stomach dropped. I scrolled faster, heart pounding now, scanning for anything that would explain it, some mistake, some duplicate name, anything. But the details were too specific. My date of birth, my information, my signature. Except I didn't remember signing this. Not this version. Not this agreement. I sat there at my desk staring at the screen while the office noise blurred around me. Phones ringing, people talking, keyboards clicking. None of it felt real. I forwarded the email to my personal account and downloaded every attachment. Then I checked my credit monitoring app. It took longer to load than usual, or maybe it just felt that way. When it finally updated, I saw the alert. New mortgage account opened. Balance higher than anything I had ever personally taken on. Associated property, the address from the document. And suddenly, I knew exactly where that address was. My parents' house. The same house my father had just told me I would never own. I leaned back slowly, a cold clarity settling in. This wasn't just paperwork. This was something else. Something deliberate. I opened the email again, this time paying attention to the fine print I had skipped before. There, buried in the middle of the document, was a clause referencing authorization granted under a previously signed document. A document I had signed. But not like this. Not for this. My phone buzzed on the desk, pulling me out of the spiral. Caller ID. Dad. I stared at it for a second before answering. Hello? His voice was calm. Too calm. Did you get something from the bank? My grip tightened around the phone. Yeah, I did. A pause. Then he said quietly, Good. Then you understand why we need to keep this within the family. I didn't respond right away, because in that moment I realized something I hadn't let myself think before. This wasn't confusion, it wasn't a misunderstanding, and it definitely wasn't temporary. I looked back at the document on my screen, my name, my signature, my responsibility. Then I asked the only question that mattered. What exactly did you do with my name? He didn't answer. He just exhaled slowly and hung up. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was panicking, but because I was trying to think clearly. Panic would have been easier, cleaner, but this wasn't a situation I could react to emotionally. I needed to understand exactly what had been done and, more importantly, what I could prove. By 8 the next morning, I was sitting in a law office across from Maya Brooks. I had found her through a colleague, someone who specialized in real estate and financial liability. Her office was quiet, minimal, and intimidating in the way that places are when people there don't waste words. Maya didn't ask me how I felt. She didn't offer sympathy. She just said, "Start from the beginning." So I did. I walked her through the calls, the paperwork, the meeting at the bank, the email, the credit alert. I handed over everything I had printed: loan documents, authorization forms, email headers. She read in silence for several minutes, flipping pages slowly, occasionally marking something with a pen. I watched her face the entire time, searching for any reaction. There wasn't much, which somehow made it worse. Finally, she set the papers down and looked at me. "You are the legal owner of the property listed here," she said. I blinked. "I know that's what it says, but I didn't buy it." "That may be true," she replied calmly. "But based on these documents, you are the primary borrower on the mortgage and the titled owner of the home." I leaned forward. "Then where did the money go because it didn't go to me?" Maya tapped one of the pages. "The loan was issued under your name, but the disbursement went directly to an existing mortgage account. That suggests a refinance or payoff structure." "My parents' house," I said quietly. Yes, the word landed heavier than I expected. I sat back trying to process it. So they used my credit to refinance their home and put it under my name. Effectively, yes. I shook my head. That doesn't make sense. Why would they do that without telling me? Maya didn't answer immediately. She studied me for a moment like she was deciding how direct to be. "Because your credit profile is stronger than theirs," she said. "Lower risk, better rates. It allowed them to secure terms they likely couldn't get on their own." "That doesn't explain why I'm the owner." "No," she agreed. "That part is more complicated." She flipped to another document, one I hadn't fully read yet. "This clause here references authorization granted under a prior agreement," she said. "Do you recognize this?" I leaned in. It was the same language I had seen the night before. "It ties back to the document I signed at the bank," I said slowly. "The temporary authorization." Maya nodded. "Do you have a copy of that? I think so." I pulled up the file on my phone and forwarded it to her. She opened it on her screen and began comparing the two documents side by side. The silence stretched again. Then she pointed. "Here." I followed her finger. "This authorization allows your father to act on your behalf in financial transactions related to the property," she explained. "But it also includes language that's broader than most people would realize at first glance." How broad? Broad enough to sign loan documents and transfer certain interests if interpreted aggressively. My stomach tightened. "So this was legal," she paused. "Parts of it may be. Parts of it may not. That depends on intent disclosure and whether you were misled about the scope of what you were signing." I let that sink in. "So what are my options?" Maya leaned back slightly, folding her hands. "You have 3 primary paths," she said. 1, you accept the situation and take over the mortgage. 2, you attempt to unwind the transaction by claiming misuse of authorization or fraud. 3, she hesitated just long enough for me to notice. 3, you assert your ownership rights." I frowned. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means," she said evenly, "that regardless of how the property ended up in your name, you are currently the legal owner. You can choose to sell it, refinance it, or set terms for anyone living there." The room felt very still. "You're saying I could control what happens to the house?" "Yes, and they'd have to follow that. If you proceed correctly, yes." I stared at her. For the first time since opening that email, something shifted inside me. Not relief, not anger. Something colder, more precise. "They told me I'd never own anything," I said quietly. Maya didn't react. She just watched me think. I looked down at the documents again, my name printed clearly across every page. Ownership, liability, authority, all things they never intended for me to fully understand. Or maybe they assumed I wouldn't look closely enough to notice. "What about the debt?" I asked. "If I take control, I'm still responsible for the mortgage, right?" "Yes," Maya said, "but you're also the only one with the legal right to make decisions about the property tied to that debt." I nodded slowly. Then another question surfaced. What if I report this? Maya met my gaze. Then it becomes a legal dispute. Potentially fraud. It could involve law enforcement, credit agencies, and civil litigation. And my parents, they would be directly implicated. The words sat between us. Heavy. Real. I exhaled, leaning back in the chair. I wasn't naive. I knew exactly what that meant. It wouldn't just destroy their finances. It would destroy everything else too. Family reputation, relationships, whatever version of trust still existed. But doing nothing wasn't an option either, because this wasn't just about a house. It was about control, and they had taken it without asking. Maya closed the folder and slid it back toward me. You don't have to decide today, she said, but whatever you choose will need to move carefully. I picked up the papers, feeling their weight in my hands. I already know one thing I said. She waited. I'm not going to fix this quietly. For the first time, she gave a small nod. Good, she said. As I stood to leave, she added one more question. Before we go further, has anyone else in your family acknowledged what happened? I thought about Daniel. The way he had avoided eye contact the last time I saw him. The way he always seemed to know more than he said. I don't know, I admitted. Maya held my gaze. You should find out, she said. Because if someone else knew and stayed silent, that changes things. I walked out of her office with a folder full of answers. And one question I hadn't asked before. How long had this been planned? Because if this wasn't a mistake, then someone in my family had made a decision about my life, long before I ever saw that deed. I didn't go straight home after leaving Maya's office. I sat in my car in the parking garage for almost 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, replaying every moment that suddenly felt off. The phone calls, the urgency, the way my father had rushed me through the paperwork. And that one afternoon at the bank, it came back in fragments at first, then all at once. It had been a Tuesday. I remember because I left work early, which I rarely did. My father had insisted the appointment couldn't be moved. Rates are changing, he said. We need to lock this in now. When I walked into the branch, they were already there. Miguel sitting upright, composed. Rosa beside him, hands folded tightly like she was holding something in. The banker, a woman named Claire, smiled the second I approached. Penelope, right? We're all set for you. That should have been my first red flag. All set, before I had even seen a single document. We sat down and Claire began flipping through a stack of papers. She didn't explain everything. She summarized. This allows your father to assist with the refinancing process. This just verifies your identity. This is standard authorization language. Each sentence made it sound smaller than it was. Temporary, routine, harmless. I remember stopping her once. Can I get copies of everything before I sign? There was a brief pause. My father leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but firm. We'll get copies after. Right now, we just need to move through this. Rosa placed her hand over mine. Mija, we're already behind schedule. It's just paperwork. I looked at her, then at him, and I nodded, because that's what I had been trained to do. Keep things moving. Don't make it harder. Don't question too much. So I signed. Page after page. Initials here, signature there, another form, another line. At one point, Claire turned a page toward me and tapped a paragraph with her pen. This section grants authorization for related financial actions tied to the property, she said. It just helps streamline things so your father doesn't have to keep looping you in. I skimmed it. I didn't read it. That was the moment. That was where everything changed. Back in my car months later, I could see it clearly. The language hadn't been specific. It had been flexible. Flexible enough to be used in ways I never agreed to. My phone buzzed, pulling me back to the present. Daniel. I stared at his name for a second before answering. Hey, I said. There was a pause on the other end. Hey, are you okay? His voice was careful. Too careful. I went to a lawyer this morning, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. Okay, he replied slowly. I tightened my grip on the phone. Did you know silence? Not confusion, not denial, just silence. That told me everything. How much did you know, Daniel? He exhaled. Not everything. That wasn't an answer. I closed my eyes. Try again. I knew they were using your credit, he said finally. I didn't know they put the house in your name. I felt something sharp cut through my chest. Not surprise, not even anger, just confirmation. How long, I asked. A few months, he admitted. Dad said it was temporary, that once things stabilized, they'd fix it. They didn't fix it, I said. I know. I opened my eyes, staring at the concrete wall in front of me. You could have told me. I thought they would handle it, he said quickly. I didn't think it would go this far. That's the problem, I replied. You didn't think. He didn't argue with that. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something that shifted the ground under me again. There's more. I went still. What do you mean I overheard Dad talking to someone a few weeks ago, Daniel said. He said if this worked, they could do it again. Maybe with a second property. My breath caught. Do it again? Yeah, he said quietly. He said your name makes everything easier. The words settled into something heavy and dangerous. This wasn't a one-time decision. It was a strategy. I felt the last piece click into place. This wasn't just about saving their house. It was about building something on top of me. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Another pause. Because I think you're about to do something, he said, and I don't want to be on the wrong side of it. I let out a slow breath. At least that was honest. I'm not trying to destroy them, I said, but I'm not letting this continue either. I get it, he replied. Do you? I do now. I didn't respond, because understanding after the fact didn't undo anything, but it did give me clarity. I ended the call and sat there for a moment longer, letting everything settle into something I could work with. Facts, documents, intent, pattern. This wasn't chaos anymore. It was a system, and systems can be dismantled if you understand how they're built. I started the car and pulled out of the garage, already thinking 3 steps ahead. By the time I got home, I had made up my mind about one thing. I wasn't walking into that house again as their daughter. Not this time. This time I was walking in as the person whose name was on every document they were trying to hide. And I was going to ask questions they couldn't answer their way out of. Because if they really believed I would never own anything, then they clearly hadn't realized what they had already handed me. Ket Thuk Fanbon. By the time I got home, I wasn't shaking anymore. That was the first sign something in me had shifted. Fear had been replaced by something more structured, something that felt a lot like the way I approached risk assessments at work, identify exposure, isolate variables, protect the downside. I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and pulled up every account tied to my name. Checking, savings, credit cards, loan history. Nothing unusual at first. Then I opened my credit monitoring dashboard again. This time I didn't just look at the alert. I went line by line. Accounts opened, dates, balances, associated addresses. There were 3 major entries tied to the same property: the mortgage I had just discovered, a home equity line of credit, and something labeled as a short-term bridge loan, all under my name. I leaned back slowly, letting the pattern form. This wasn't one transaction. It was layered. They hadn't just used my credit once they had built on it. I clicked into the details of the home equity line. The amount wasn't small, not something you take out casually. I checked the disbursement history. Withdrawn, transferred, gone. No record of it ever touching my accounts. I picked up my phone and called the bank listed on the report. After navigating the usual automated system, I finally reached a representative. "Hi, I'm calling about an account under my name," I said. "I need to verify some transactions. They asked for my information, date of birth, last 4 digits of my social security questions." Then the pause, the kind that tells you they're seeing something you're not supposed to see. "Yes, Ms. Perez," the representative said. "I do see the account. What specifically are you trying to confirm the disbursement history?" I said. "Where the funds were transferred." Another pause. Typing. "It appears the funds were transferred to an external account linked during the application process," she said. "Whose account?" "I'm sorry, I can't disclose that without additional verification." "I am the account holder," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Yes, but the external account belongs to a different party." I closed my eyes for a second. Was it linked at the time the account was opened? Yes. By me. A hesitation. "It was authorized under the application," she said carefully. That wasn't an answer, but it told me enough. "Can you tell me the name on that account?" Another pause. Then quietly, "Miguel Perez." I didn't react. Not out loud. "Thank you," I said. "That's all I needed." I ended the call and set the phone down slowly. So that's how they had done it. Use my name to open the credit line, link his account to receive the funds, move the money before I ever saw a statement. Clean, efficient, intentional. I opened a blank document and started writing everything down. Dates, accounts, transfers, names. If this became a legal issue, and it was getting closer to that, I needed a clear timeline. No emotion, just facts. An hour later, my laptop chimed with a new notification. Email. From my father. Subject. "We need to talk." I stared at it for a moment before opening it. "Penelope, you're overthinking this. Everything we did was to protect the family. The house is stable now because of it. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be. Call me." No apology, no explanation, just direction. I almost laughed. Instead, I replied, "We will talk. Tomorrow night. At the house. Everyone present." I hit send before I could second guess it. If they wanted to keep this within the family, then we were going to define exactly what that meant. My phone rang less than a minute later. "Dad." I let it ring once. Twice. Then answered. "What is this about, Penelope?" he asked immediately. "You know what it's about. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Am I?" I said. "Because from where I'm sitting, I'm the primary borrower on multiple loans. I never agreed to tied to a property I didn't purchase with money that never touched my accounts." Silence. Then, "We can fix it." The same phrase Daniel had used. How I asked. Another pause. "We'll refinance again," he said. "Move things around. It just takes time." "No," I said. It takes control. His tone sharpened. Watch how you talk to me. I felt something settle into place inside me. Not anger, not fear. Authority. I'll see you tomorrow night, I said. Then I hung up. I looked back at my laptop at the timeline I had built, at the accounts, the transfers, the pattern. This wasn't something that could be undone quietly. And it definitely wasn't something I was going to fix for them. If anything, they had already handed me the leverage. They just didn't realize I knew how to use it. I closed my laptop and stood up, the decision fully formed now. Tomorrow wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a negotiation. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking in to ask for anything. I was walking in to set terms. I got there 10 minutes early, not because I was nervous, but because I didn't want to walk into a conversation they had already started without me. The house looked exactly the same. Fresh paint. The porch light my mother always insisted on leaving on, the same front door I had walked through 1,000 times growing up. For a second I stood there remembering what it used to feel like to come home. Then I knocked. My father opened the door almost immediately, like he had been standing there waiting. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. No warmth, no smile. Inside, my mother was already seated at the dining table. Daniel sat across from her, his posture stiff, eyes flicking toward me and then away. Everything was set, just like Sunday night. Only this time, I wasn't the one walking in unprepared. I took a seat, placing my folder on the table in front of me. I didn't open it yet. I just let it sit there, visible. My father remained standing for a moment before finally sitting down at the head of the table. "So," he said, folding his hands. "Let's talk." I nodded. "Let's." No one spoke for a few seconds. The silence stretched thick but controlled. My mother broke first. "You've been distant," she said softly. "We're worried about you." I looked at her. "Are you—" She blinked, thrown off by the question. "Of course we are." I nodded slowly, then slid one sheet of paper out of the folder and placed it in the center of the table. It was the mortgage summary. My name at the top, the balance underneath. "You want to start there?" I asked. My father glanced at it, then leaned back slightly. "We already told you we were refinancing. It was necessary." "That's not what I asked," I said. His jaw tightened. "What exactly do you think happened here, Penelope?" I held his gaze. "I think you used my credit to refinance your house. I think you opened additional lines of credit in my name, and I think you linked your account to receive the funds." No one moved, not my mother, not Daniel. My father didn't deny it. He just said, "We were going to fix it." The same line again. I reached into the folder and pulled out another document, the transaction history from the home equity line. "This was drawn down 2 weeks after the mortgage closed," I said, sliding it forward. "The funds went directly into your account." My mother's eyes dropped to the paper. My father didn't look. "You're making this sound worse than it is," he said. "Then make it sound better," I replied. "Explain it." He exhaled sharply. "We needed liquidity," he said. "The house needed work. We had debts. This was the fastest way to stabilize everything. At my expense. At the family's benefit," he corrected. There it was, the justification. The same logic they had always used, just scaled up. I nodded slowly. "And the second property?" I asked. That got a reaction. Daniel looked up. My mother froze. My father's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about? I'm talking about the conversation you had a few weeks ago," I said evenly, "about doing this again, using my name to make things easier." Silence dropped over the table again, this time heavier. My father turned his head slightly toward Daniel. You told her Daniel didn't answer. He didn't have to. I leaned forward just enough to keep control of the moment. This wasn't a one-time decision, I said. It was a plan. My mother shook her head quickly. No, that's not fair. We weren't trying to hurt you. I looked at her. You didn't think about whether it would hurt me. That landed. She looked down, hands tightening in her lap. My father leaned forward now, his voice lower. You're focusing on the wrong thing, he said. The house is secure. The payments are being made. Your credit hasn't been damaged. Yet I said. His expression hardened. We've managed everything responsibly. With my name, I replied. Another pause. Then he said it. You owe this family. The words were quiet, controlled, but they hit exactly where they were meant to. For a second, I felt the old instinct, the one that told me to soften, to compromise, to find a way to keep things from breaking. Then I looked down at the documents again. My name, my liability, my risk. And I realized something. This wasn't about what I owed them. It was about what they had already taken. I sat back in my chair, letting that clarity settle. No, I said calmly. I don't. The shift was immediate. My father straightened. My mother looked up. Even Daniel's posture changed. Because they heard it. The difference. I helped you. I continued. More than once. More than I was comfortable with. What you did here wasn't help. It was control. That's not true, my father snapped. It is, I said. And now it's documented. I tapped the folder lightly. For the first time, he looked at it. Really looked at it. What are you planning to do? He asked. There it was. Not denial. Not justification. Concern. I met his eyes. I'm going to protect myself, I said. How I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into the folder one more time and pulled out a separate set of papers. Clean, structured, prepared. I placed them on the table between us. What is this? My mother asked quietly. I looked at all of them before answering. It's the only reason we're still having this conversation as a family, I said. My father picked up the top page, scanning the first few lines. I watched his expression change, not dramatically, but enough. Confusion. Then realization. Then something sharper. This isn't. He started, then stopped. I leaned forward slightly. It is, I said, and for the first time that night, he didn't interrupt me. My father didn't say anything for a few seconds. He just kept reading. The room was completely still, the kind of silence where even small movements feel loud. I could hear the paper shift slightly in his hands, my mother's breathing, Daniel shifting in his chair. Finally, Miguel set the document down. This is a lease, he said. Correct, I replied. He looked up at me, eyes sharp now. You're serious? I am. My mother leaned forward, confused. What does that mean? It means, I said evenly, that if you want to continue living in this house, you'll do it under a formal agreement. As tenants. The word landed harder than I expected. Tenants, not owners, not decision makers, not in control. My father let out a short, disbelieving breath. You're going to charge us rent. In our own home. I didn't react to the tone. In the property that is legally under my name, I corrected. That's a technicality, he snapped. No, I said calmly. It's a legal reality. My mother shook her head slowly, trying to process it. Penelope, We're your parents. I know, I said, and that's the only reason this option exists. That got her attention. What do you mean? I slid the second page of the document toward her. Because the alternative is reporting unauthorized use of my financial identity, I said, which becomes a legal matter, not a family one. Daniel looked up quickly at that. You'd really do that? He asked. I met his eyes. I'd really protect myself. No anger, no raised voice, just the truth. My father leaned back in his chair, studying me in a way he hadn't before. Not as a daughter, as someone he needed to reassess. What are the terms, he asked finally. That was the moment everything shifted. Because he didn't argue the premise, he asked about the conditions. I opened the document and spoke clearly, making sure there was no confusion. Monthly rent set below market, but enough to cover the mortgage and reduce the principal. Utilities remain your responsibility. No additional loans or financial activity tied to my name directly or indirectly. Any violation of these terms voids the agreement. My mother frowned slightly. Void how? It means you'll have to leave, I said. Silence again. This time it wasn't disbelief. It was calculation. My father tapped the paper lightly. And if we don't sign this, I didn't hesitate. Then I move forward with legal counsel, I said. I separate my financial liability, and the situation is handled externally. You mean court? He said. Yes. He stared at me for a long moment. You're willing to take your own parents to court over this? I held his gaze. I'm willing to stop being used. That landed differently. Not as an accusation, as a boundary. My mother's voice softened, almost pleading now. We were trying to keep this family together. I looked at her. No, I said gently. You were trying to keep control. She flinched slightly, like the word itself had weight. Daniel spoke up quietly. The terms, they're not unreasonable. My father turned his head sharply toward him. You're siding with her. I'm not siding with anyone, Daniel said. I'm just saying this could be worse. He wasn't wrong. My father knew it too. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers pressed into the edge of the table. He was running through the options. Public exposure, legal risk, financial consequences, versus this. A controlled outcome, one where he lost authority but kept stability. You planned this, he said, finally looking back at me. Yes. With that lawyer. Yes. Another pause. Then, almost quietly, you've been preparing this since you found out. I didn't correct him, because that was exactly what I had been doing. Why not just report it? Daniel asked. The question lingered in the air for a second. I answered honestly, because I don't want to destroy everything I said. I just want it to stop. My mother looked at me, then really looked at me for the first time that night. Not as someone she could influence, but as someone she no longer could. My father picked up the document again, scanning the lines more carefully this time. When he spoke, his voice had changed. Less force, more control. If we agree to this, you don't pursue anything else. Correct, I said. And the house remains under my ownership, I replied, with the option to reassess in the future. He nodded slowly, absorbing it. Then he asked the question I had been waiting for. What guarantees do we have? I almost smiled. None, I said, the same way I didn't have any. That was the truth, and it settled into the room like something final. No one spoke for a long time after that, because there wasn't anything left to argue, only a decision to make. My father set the document down carefully, his hand resting on top of it, not rejecting it, not accepting it, just holding it there. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't expected. This wasn't about winning, it was about shifting the structure they had built around me. And now that structure was gone. All that was left was whether they were willing to live within the one I had just created. My father finally looked up again. "This changes everything," he said. I met his gaze without hesitation. "I know," I replied, and for the first time in my life, he didn't try to change it back. No one signed that night. My father gathered the papers, stacked them carefully, and set them back down like he was buying himself time. "We'll review this," he said. I nodded. "You should." That was it. No yelling, no dramatic exit. Just a quiet pause that said more than anything else could have. I left without hugging anyone, and for the first time I didn't feel guilty about it. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. No calls from my mother. No texts from my father. Even Daniel stayed silent. If this had happened a year ago, that silence would have eaten at me. I would have filled it with worry, imagined worst-case scenarios, convinced myself I had gone too far. But now I understood something different. Silence wasn't rejection. It was pressure. They were waiting to see if I would fold. So I didn't. I went to work. I finished my reports. I followed up with Maya, sent her updated documentation, and asked her to prepare everything in case we needed to move forward legally. Give them a deadline, she advised. Uncertainty works in their favor, not yours. She was right. So on the 4th day, I sent a message. You have 48 hours to review and respond. After that, I proceed with legal action. Simple, clear, no emotion. I stared at the message for a few seconds before hitting send. Then I closed my phone and went back to work. They responded the next morning, not with a call, with a request. Meet us tonight. Same place, same time. I agreed. This time when I walked into the house, something felt different. Subtle, but real. The air wasn't tense in the same way. It was cautious, measured. My mother was already seated again, but she didn't speak when I walked in. She just watched me. Daniel gave me a small nod. My father stood by the table, the documents already laid out in front of him. Organized. Marked. Reviewed. That told me everything I needed to know. I took my seat without waiting to be asked. "Well," I said. My father didn't sit immediately. He rested his hands on the back of the chair, looking at me like he was recalibrating something. Then he sat. We went through everything he said. And he slid the papers toward me. There were notes in the margins, a few sections highlighted. "You've structured this carefully," he admitted. "I had help. I can see that." My mother finally spoke, her voice softer than before. "The rent? It's manageable," she said, "but it still feels like a loss of control." I finished for her. She didn't argue. "Because that's exactly what it was." My father tapped one of the pages. "This clause," he said, "about immediate termination if there's any financial activity tied to your name. That's strict." "It's necessary," I replied. "We're not trying to do anything else," he said. "I know," I said calmly. "This makes sure that stays true." He studied me for a moment, then nodded once. "Fair enough." That's what the nod meant. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "There's one more thing," he said. I looked at him. "We think you should consider adding a long-term option," he continued. "Something that allows them to eventually buy the house back." My father glanced at him, surprised. My mother looked hopeful for the first time since I arrived. I considered it. Not emotionally, structurally. A purchase option would require full financial transparency, I said. Verified income, clean credit, and no hidden liabilities. My father let out a small breath. That's a lot. It's what the bank would require anyway, I replied. He didn't argue, because he knew that was true. And until then, I added the property remains under my control. My mother nodded slowly. That's fair. Another shift. Small, but real. My father picked up a pen, turning it between his fingers. If we sign this, he said, this is how things are from now on. Yes. No more flexibility. No more assumptions, I corrected. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he signed. Just like that. No speech. No hesitation. His name went on the line firm and steady. My mother followed a few seconds later, her hand trembling slightly but her signature clear. Daniel didn't sign. He wasn't part of the agreement, but he watched the entire thing like he was witnessing something irreversible. Because he was. I signed last. Not because I needed to, but because it mattered. When the pen left the paper, the room felt different. Not lighter, but clearer. Defined. My father set the pen down and leaned back in his chair. Well, he said quietly, I guess this is what ownership looks like. I held his gaze. Yes, I said. And for the first time, he didn't argue with me. The first rent payment came exactly on time. That shouldn't have felt significant, but it did. Not because of the money, because of what it represented. For the first time, the flow of control had reversed. I didn't deposit the check right away. I sat with it for a moment at my kitchen table, looking at my father's handwriting across the front. It was neat, intentional, just like everything else he did. Except this time it wasn't attached to something hidden. It was documented, agreed, defined. I deposited it later that afternoon, then logged the transaction into the spreadsheet I had built to track everything related to the property, mortgage payments, principal reduction, maintenance costs. No guesswork, no assumptions, just structure. A week later, Maya called me. I reviewed the signed agreement, she said. Everything is solid. You've protected yourself well. That was the goal. There was a brief pause on her end. How are things? Otherwise, she asked. I knew what she meant. Different, I said, but stable. That's usually how boundaries feel at first, she replied. Not comfortable, not familiar, but necessary. At the house, things adjusted slowly. Daniel told me later that the first few days after signing were tense. My father kept to himself. My mother moved carefully, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. But something else changed too. The small comments stopped. The passive remarks about money, the quiet expectations, they were gone. Not because they had been resolved, because they no longer worked. About 3 weeks in, my mother called me. Not about money, not about the house, just to talk. Hey, Mija, she said softly. Hi, Mom. There was a pause. I was thinking, maybe you could come by for dinner sometime, she said. The invitation was careful, not assumed, offered. I noticed the difference immediately. I'll think about it, I said. And I meant it, because now it was a choice. My father didn't call, not at first. But he did send a message a few days later. Short, direct, roof inspection scheduled next week. I'll send you the report. I read it twice, not because it was complicated, because it was new. He wasn't informing me as a courtesy. He was informing me because he had to. Because that's what the agreement required. Because that's how things worked now. I replied with a simple thank you. Send all documentation when you have it. No extra words. No emotional layering, just clarity. A month in the pattern held. Payments on time. No new accounts. No unexpected alerts on my credit report. Everything contained. But one thing still lingered. The decision I hadn't made yet. Whether to keep the house long term. I brought it up with Maya during our next meeting. I have the option to sell, I said. Clear the debt walk away clean. And she asked, I haven't done it. Why not? I thought about that for a second. Then I answered honestly. Because selling it feels like reacting, I said. And I'm not reacting anymore. Maya nodded slightly. That's a different position than when you first came in, she said. I know. Then the question isn't whether you can sell, she continued. It's whether keeping it serves you. That was the right question. Not what was easier. Not what was cleaner. What actually aligned with the structure I had built. A few days later, I drove by the house. I didn't go in. I just parked across the street and sat there for a while. It looked the same as always, but I didn't see it the same way anymore. It wasn't a symbol of obligation, or guilt, or expectation. It was an asset, a responsibility, something I could choose how to manage, or whether to keep at all. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. A message from my mother. Dinner this Sunday. No pressure. Just wanted to ask. I stared at it for a moment, then I typed back, I can come by for an hour, not a full evening, not an open-ended visit. An hour. Defined. When I got there that Sunday, things felt quieter. Not tense, not warm, just balanced. My father greeted me at the door. Hi, he said. Hi. No hug, no forced gesture. Just acknowledgement. At the table, we talked about normal things, work, weather, Daniel's plans. No one mentioned the agreement. No one needed to. Because it was there under everything, holding the structure in place. Halfway through the meal, my mother looked at me. We're keeping up with everything she said. Like we agreed. I know, I replied. She nodded, then hesitated. I'm sorry, she said quietly. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't followed by an explanation. Just there. I didn't rush to respond. I let the moment sit. Then I nodded once. I hear you. That was enough. For now. Later that night back at home, I opened my laptop and reviewed the latest mortgage statement. Balance slightly lower, payments current, everything aligned. I closed the file and sat back, letting the quiet settle around me. Nothing had been undone. Nothing had been erased. But everything had been redefined. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. I was deciding what happened next. 3 months later, everything still held. No missed payments, no new accounts, no surprises. That alone told me more than anything they had said at the table. Structure had replaced assumption, and once that happened, the entire dynamic changed. I met Maya one last time to review my position. Financially, you're stable, she said, sliding the updated reports across the desk. Legally, you're protected. The question now is long-term strategy. I've been thinking about that, I said, and I'm keeping the house. She nodded, not surprised. Then you'll want to formalize the lease into a longer-term agreement, she said. Add review periods, adjust terms if necessary, and keep everything documented. I will. She paused, then added, You handled this well, Penelope. Not many people would have taken this route. I understood what she meant. I could have escalated, forced consequences faster, made it public. But that wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want destruction. I wanted control. And I had it. At home, I updated the agreement. Not dramatically, just enough to reflect reality. Annual review, clear documentation requirements, strict boundaries around any financial activity tied to my name. Nothing emotional, just structure. When I brought the updated version to the house, the reaction was different from the first time. No shock, no resistance, just acceptance. My father read through it carefully, then signed without comment. My mother followed her hand steadier this time. Daniel watched again, but this time there was something else in his expression. Respect. Not for what I had done to them, for what I had refused to let happen again. Our relationship didn't go back to what it was before, and I didn't expect it to. There were fewer calls, fewer assumptions, fewer moments where I felt pulled into something I didn't choose. But there was something else now. Clarity. When my mother called, it was to talk, not to ask. When my father sent updates, they were factual, not directive. When I visited, it was on my terms. And when I left, I didn't carry anything with me that wasn't mine. One afternoon, about 5 months after everything had started, I stood in front of the house again. This time I didn't stay across the street. I walked up to the front door, unlocked it, and stepped inside without knocking. Not because I wanted to make a point. Because I didn't need to anymore. My father looked up from the kitchen. "Hey," he said. "Hey." No tension, no performance. Just recognition. I walked through the house slowly, noticing small changes. Things repaired, things maintained, things taken care of, because now they had to be. Before I left, my father stopped me near the door. "I didn't think it would turn out like this," he said. "I know." He nodded once. "We thought we were doing what we had to do." I met his gaze, and I did what I had to do. There was no argument after that, because there wasn't anything left to defend. That night back in my apartment, I sat at the same table where I had first opened that email months ago. The same space, a completely different person. I thought about everything that had happened, not as a series of conflicts, but as a pattern. Trust without boundaries, help without clarity, family without structure. And how easily that had been turned into something else. Something that looked like support, but functioned like control. I didn't get everything back. Not the version of my family I thought I had. Not the simplicity of believing that helping meant being safe. But I gained something else. Something more stable. I learned how to separate care from access. How to support without surrendering control. How to say no without turning it into a fight. And most importantly, how to recognize when something is being taken, even if it's wrapped in the language of love. If you've ever been in a situation where helping your family slowly turned into carrying everything for them, you know how hard it is to see the line. It doesn't appear all at once. It moves, quietly, until one day you realize you're responsible for something you never agreed to. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you stop caring. It just means you stop being the only one paying the cost. And sometimes the most powerful kind of response isn't cutting people off. It's changing the structure they depend on. If you're watching this, I'd really like to hear your perspective. Where are you from and what time is it there right now? Have you ever had to set a boundary with family that changed everything? If this story resonated with you, you can subscribe and stay with me for more stories like this. And just to be clear, this is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.